Earning your degree online doesn't mean you have to go about it alone. At Capella University, we're here to support you when you're ready. From enrollment counselors who get to know you and your goals, to academic coaches who can help you form a plan to stay on track. We care about your success and are dedicated to helping you pursue your goals. Going back to school is a big step, but having support at every step of your academic journey can make a big difference. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This episode is brought to you by Ring cameras and doorbells. A lot happens while you're away from home. That's why Ring makes it easy to check in from anywhere. Whether you're saying hi to an unexpected guest, making sure those packages are safe, or keeping your pets company while you're out grabbing groceries. It's all a few taps away, right from your phone. Be there with Ring. Explore cameras, doorbells, alarm kits, and more right now at ring.com.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits, including personal shoutouts, early access to episodes, bonus episodes, and more. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. As always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Important note, sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. Content warning. This episode includes discussions about child abuse, child sexual abuse, and other crimes against children. Listener discretion is advised. In April 2022, then 74-year-old Melvin Quinney walked into court a convicted felon and registered sex offender. Within a short time, Melvin walked out of the courtroom cleared of the charges that sent him to prison for 8 years. In 1990, he was convicted of a heinous crime, indecency with a child, and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Though he was released on parole in 1999, Quinney was forced to register as a sex offender and watched helplessly as his 4 children were forced into foster care. During his trial, Quinney's son, John Parker, testified against him, which likely sealed his fate. Except, none of it was true. In fact, Quinney's case was one of over 12,000 unsubstantiated cases of child abuse during the 1980s and 1990s, in what is known as the Satanic Panic. For nearly a decade, a moral panic, or perhaps paranoia, swept across the United States, with multitudes believing children were being ritually abused and thousands were being killed by a network of Satanists, all in the name of Satan himself. In this episode of The Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the horrifying reality of the Satanic Panic. And for the first time, this will be a 4-part series, set to release once per week. We'll explore the origins of the Satanic Panic. And then, in upcoming episodes, we'll explore the religious influences that contributed to it, the cultural effects of the Satanic Panic, and finally, the aftermath and legacy and consider parallels to today's conspiracy-laden society. How did it begin? And was there really a secret network of Satanists hell-bent on destroying homes, society, and the country itself in the name of Satan? I'll share the details. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. In some sense, human beings have always believed in conspiracy theories, to varying degrees, and with varying consequences. The Red Scare of the 1940s and 1950s, the JFK assassination in 1963, the Apollo moon landing in 1969, and more often make the list of the most prominent conspiracy theories of the past 75 years. An American Psychological Association article, dated June 26, 2023, offers a helpful explanation on what drives conspiracy theories, stating, quote, "People can be prone to believe in conspiracy theories due to a combination of personality traits and motivations, including relying strongly on their intuition, feeling a sense of antagonism and superiority toward others, and perceiving threats in their environment. Many turn to conspiracy theories to fulfill deprived motivational needs and make sense of distress and impairment." End quote. These theories, in some ways, offer a way for people to make sense of the world around them. And let's face it, there are lots of things going on in the world that are difficult to understand. But where many conspiracy theories are nothing more than interesting conversation, there are a few that have wreaked havoc on individuals, communities, and entire societies. The Satanic Panic falls into the latter category. In 1980, psychiatrist Lawrence Pazder co-published a book with his patient and future wife, Michelle Smith. The book was entitled Michelle Remembers, the true story of a year-long contest between innocence and evil. A book synopsis reads as follows, quote, "Michelle Smith was 5 years old when her mother offered her up to a cult of devil worshippers to be used demonically to raise Satan himself. 22 years later, on a psychiatrist's couch, she relived the long-buried horrors inflicted upon her, as her childhood agonies came screaming forth in terrifying detail. With the help of her bishop, Michelle brought her hideous story to the Vatican. Satanic witches chanting to summon the devil, wounds appearing on her skin, human and animal sacrifices. Now, the full story, with vivid photographs, records Michelle's victory, a child's survival in the face of sheer madness." End quote. The book was marketed as Michelle's autobiography and contains graphic descriptions of satanic ritual abuse when she was a small child. In the years before publication, Michelle Smith was meeting regularly with Lawrence Pazder to treat her depression. And at some point, she expressed feeling like she, quote, "had something important to tell him, but could not remember what it was," end quote. After a session where Smith screamed and spoke in the voice of a 5-year-old, Pazder encouraged her to undergo hypnosis to retrieve her memories. He spent more than a year and over 600 hours using hypnosis to help Michelle Smith recover memories of her abuse. According to Michelle, her mother, along with members of a satanic cult, sexually abused her when she was 5 years old. The book also claimed a global satanic cult, comprised of wealthy celebrities, was ritually abusing thousands, if not tens of thousands, of small children. Michelle Remembers became an instant bestseller. Michelle Remembers became the spark that ignited the Satanic Panic. Michelle Remembers was debunked as being entirely made up. But it was too late. Despite the book's sweeping claims of satanic ritual abuse, subsequent investigations failed to produce corroborating evidence. In fact, many of the memories supposedly recovered under hypnosis were shown to be influenced by, quote, popular culture and fiction that were popular at the time when it was written, end quote. That the book was a fabrication didn't matter. The die was already cast, and there was no going back from it. To understand the connection between Michelle Remembers and the Satanic Panic, it's important to grasp the cultural climate at the start of the 1980s. A New York Times article dated March 31, 2021, offers a helpful explanation. Quote, when the book Michelle Remembers was published in 1980, it landed on a powder keg of American anxieties. More women were going to work, by choice and necessity in the wake of the women's rights movement, and as the country struggled with the recession. Conservatism and the religious right were ascendant, and both emphasized the nuclear family. Good daycare was hard to find, and many parents felt guilty for relying on it. And after decades of denial, the public was starting to confront the problem of sexual abuse, especially involving children. You hook all of those things together magically, and boom, you've got the proper fuel for a moral panic. End quote. In some sense, what fueled Americans' anxieties was the possibility that Satanists and occultists could be your friends, family members, co-workers, healthcare professionals, or next-door neighbors. Rather than an abstract, amorphous group of Satanists somewhere out there in the world, Michelle Remembers set off the grim and terrifying prospect that the person sitting at your dining room table, maybe even someone you call mom or dad, could be a Satanist. At the same time, these specific fears were rooted in a generalized and unknown possibility. In other words, people were fearful of Satanists, occultists, and ritual abuse. And as I mentioned at the start, over 12,000 criminal cases went to trial as a direct result of the Satanic Panic. But those fears were not only unfounded, but were grounded in misinformation and a false reality. Even before the release of Michelle Remembers, the country was primed to find an enemy they could pin their anxieties and ailments on. And what better enemy than Satan himself? We'll explore this more in Part 3 of this series. But by the time 1980 rolled around, the country had seen the release of a series of horror movies having to do with Satanism. Rosemary's Baby in 1968, The Exorcist in 1973, and The Omen in 1976. Not only that, but also in the 1960s, several new religious movements popped up, including the Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey. The Manson family murders in 1969 set the country on edge and on the lookout for cults. Arguably one of the most important bricks in the foundation of the Satanic Panic was the 1972 release of Mike Warnke's memoir, The Satan Seller. I referenced this book in episode 5 of the Red Treehouse, where we explored phonetic reversal, sometimes referred to as backmasking. Warnke claimed to have been a leader in a satanic cult with over 1,500 members, and to have engaged in rape and human sacrifice. However, at some point, he became an evangelical Christian and turned from his life of occultism and sexual abuse and murder. Like Michelle Smith's book 8 years later, Warnke's book became a bestseller, especially among evangelical Christians. And, like Michelle Smith's book, Mike Warnke's book was also debunked as pure fabrication. In 1983, a major criminal case in California set the Satanic Panic into high gear. If Michelle Remembers was the match, then the McMartin preschool trial was the gas can. Though I offered a content warning at the start of the episode, I'll give another here. The following contains graphic descriptions of sexual abuse against children. Listener discretion is advised. In 1983, a report came into police from Judy Johnson. She claimed her preschool-age son had been sodomized by her estranged husband and McMartin schoolteacher Ray Buckey, the grandson of the school's founder and son of the school's administrator. Johnson came to her conclusion of abuse after, quote, her son had painful bowel movements, end quote. The accusations didn't stop there. Judy Johnson claimed staff at the daycare, quote, had sexual encounters with animals, end quote, and made additional accusations against Ray Buckey. Something interesting. Ray Buckey was arrested and interrogated by police, but initially no charges were filed due to a lack of evidence. Instead, police sent a letter to parents of students at the McMartin school, nearly 200 in total, informing them their children may have been abused. The letter, dated September 8, 1983, stated in part, quote, Dear parent, this department is conducting a criminal investigation involving child molestation by Ray Buckey, an employee of Virginia McMartin's preschool, who was arrested on September 7, 1983, by this department. The following procedure is obviously an unpleasant one, but to protect the rights of your children, as well as the rights of the accused, this inquiry is necessary for a complete investigation. Records indicate that your child has been or is currently a student at the preschool. We are asking your assistance in this continuing investigation. Please question your child to see if he or she has been witness to any crime or if he or she has been a victim. Our investigation indicates that possible criminal acts include oral sex, fondling of genitals, buttock or chest area, and sodomy, possibly committed under the pretense of taking the child's temperature. Also, photos may have been taken of children without their clothing. Any information from your child regarding having ever observed Ray Buckey to leave a classroom alone with a child during any nap period, or if they have ever observed Ray Buckey tie up a child, is important. End quote. Shortly after the release of the letter, The Children's Institute International interviewed several hundred children, and, quote, by spring of 1984, it was claimed that 360 children had been abused, end quote. Except the interviewing techniques were suggestive and invited children to pretend about supposed instances of abuse. These suggestive techniques inevitably led to false allegations of child sexual abuse. Something interesting. Transcripts of the interrogation recordings reveal that children were resistant to disclosing abuse, despite the interview techniques used. On March 22, 1984, Virginia McMartin, the school's founder, her daughter Peggy McMartin Bucky, her grandchildren Ray and Peggy Ann Bucky, and staff members Mary Ann Jackson, Betty Rader, and Babette Spittler were charged with over 100 total counts of child abuse, which was later increased to over 300 counts of child abuse involving nearly 50 children. Something interesting. By the start of the trial, Michelle Remembers had already been debunked and discredited. However, Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pasder met with the families who made allegations, and it is believed they influenced their testimony. In 1986, the charges against Virginia McMartin, Peggy Ann Bucky, Mary Ann Jackson, Betty Rader, and Babette Spittler were dropped. However, Peggy McMartin Bucky and Ray Bucky were still awaiting trial, with Peggy's bail set at $1 million and Ray being denied bail entirely. Peggy Ann Bucky's trial began on July 13, 1987, with the prosecution going on the attack. They presented 7 medical experts to corroborate their evidence. From the onset of the trial, though, the prosecution presented a disjointed case filled with inconsistent testimony and unconvincing evidence. After nearly 3 years of testimony and over 9 weeks of jury deliberation, Peggy Ann Bucky was acquitted on all charges. Something interesting. In 1989, while she was on trial, Peggy Ann Bucky applied to have her teaching license reinstated. A judge ruled in her favor, citing a lack of evidence that would lead to suspension. Quote, a pronounced absence of any evidence implicating Peggy Ann in any wrongdoing. End quote. Ray Bucky was cleared on 52 out of 65 counts and set free on bail. According to a post-trial press interview, most jurors believed the children had been sexually abused. However, there was insufficient evidence to convict the defendants beyond a reasonable doubt. Because of this deadlock, the trial resulted in a hung jury. Ray Bucky's second trial began on May 7, 1990, during which he was tried on 6 of the 13 remaining counts. On July 27, 1990, the trial resulted in a hung jury, after which the prosecution refused to pursue a conviction and resulted in the dismissal of all charges. In many ways, the release of Michelle Remembers and the McMartin preschool trial were a microcosm of the Satanic Panic overall, a wild conspiracy theory that led to real-world accusations, arrests, and trials, and in some cases, convictions for crimes that never happened. And here's the thing, no one was immune. The Satanic Panic affected individuals, families, churches, professionals, social workers, doctors, celebrities, and more. Games, music, movies, and other forms of entertainment came under intense scrutiny, as some alleged satanic messages were being hidden in role-playing games, rock and roll music, and more. And in a case of circular logic, those who decried the Satanic Panic were cast as conspirators and perpetrators, as in, if you denied the problem, you were really a part of it. It seems no one was safe from the clutches and influence of Satan, and no one was more vulnerable than innocent children. Something fascinating. The Satanic Panic coincided with increased awareness of child abuse and the implementation of mandated reporting. It seemed to be a case of right diagnosis, completely wrong cure. Several specific conspiracies were postulated, the most prominent being that a network of Satanists was systematically abusing and killing children in the name of Satan. On October 22, 1988, Geraldo Rivera released a 2-hour expose entitled Devil Worship, Exposing Satan's Playground, during which he alleges, quote, "Estimates are that there are over 1 million Satanists in the United States, and they are linked in a highly organized, secretive network." End quote. The paranoia was widespread, and the hunt for Satanists became of paramount importance. A New York Times article stated, quote, "Vigilante parents dug under a preschool, searching for secret tunnels. The police swapped tips on identifying pagan symbols. A company that sells toothpaste and soap had to deny repeatedly that it was acting as an agent of Satan." Early in the 1980s, baseless conspiracy theories about cults committing mass child abuse spread around the country. Talk shows and news programs fanned fears, and the authorities investigated hundreds of allegations. Even as cases slowly collapsed and skepticism prevailed, defendants went to prison, families were traumatized, and millions of dollars were spent on prosecutions. End quote. You heard that right. A major corporation, Procter & Gamble, was accused of working to advance the agenda of Satan. A March 1980 article in the Minneapolis Tribune accused the company of hiding satanic imagery in its logo. At the time, a man in the shape of a moon, looking out at 13 stars. Except the logo was trademarked in 1882. Wasn't satanic at all. And the 13 stars represented the 13 original American colonies. But that didn't stop people from seeing what they wanted. One article stated, quote, "First, the curls in the beard and hair of the Moon Man resembled the number 6, and each pattern of curls happened in a series of 3. Additionally, when connected, there were 3 distinct patterns in the 13 stars that created another series of 3 6s. In the minds of many, the recurring instances of the number 666 in the design of the logo were references to the mark of the beast in Christian theology." End quote. Company representatives repeatedly defended themselves against and outright denied any association with Satan, and even announced in 1985 they would be dropping the logo indefinitely. By then, it didn't matter. The Satanic Panic had gained traction and infiltrated nearly every aspect of American society and culture. In episode 59 of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the religious influences that fertilized the soil of the Satanic Panic. In episode 61, we'll explore the cultural effects of the Satanic Panic. And in episode 63, we'll explore the aftermath and the legacy of the Satanic Panic and consider parallels to today's conspiracy-laden society. When I think about conspiracy theories in general, and the Satanic Panic specifically, one word comes to mind: shame. I'll be the first to admit the world can be difficult to understand at times. And I'll also admit there are times when I am hell-bent on finding answers or solutions or clarity to those difficult situations. But I draw the line at hurting others or myself. I simply cannot fathom coming up with solutions that harm innocent people, intentionally or unintentionally. And yet, that's exactly what we've seen with the origins of the Satanic Panic, and even other prominent conspiracy theories. And while I've said in previous episodes that I hold a natural and supernatural intention, I don't consider the Satanic Panic supernatural at all. And while I have empathy for those who genuinely believed Satan was out to ruin the world, I don't have empathy for people who knowingly levied false accusations at innocent people, effectively ruining their lives and reputations. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with this lingering question: was there really a secret network of Satanists hell-bent on destroying homes, society, and the country in the name of Satan? I've shared the details. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.